Thousands of trucks ready for sale, just sitting unused in lots.
Chevy just made the biggest fire sale in truck history, and nobody's safe. 3 million trucks dumped into lots from Dallas to Detroit. Rows of Silverados sit collecting dust while managers slash prices and whisper the same phrase, "Move the metal, no matter the cost." But what looks like deals today is the symptom of something far worse.
Pickup trucks have become so imposing over the years, and apparently this is a problem.
How did trucks that once carried markups turn into liabilities? What does this mean for your trade-in value? And who takes the hit when factories slow to a crawl? Dealer reality. Chevy did not just release trucks into the market, they unleashed a tidal wave. Across America, dealer backlots look more like storage yards than sales centers. Rows upon rows of unsold gas-powered Silverados stand idle, their chrome grills catching the sun while dust begins to gather. In towns from Dallas to Detroit, sales managers pace their offices, phones pressed to their ears, making desperate calls to drum up buyers who are no longer eager to commit. The panic is palpable. 2 years ago, these same trucks commanded 5-figure markups. Dealers bragged that they could not keep them on the lot for more than a week. Now, the same vehicles sit for months. Salespeople whisper about the sudden shift in tone from corporate headquarters. Move the metal, no matter what it takes. The phrase, "whatever it takes," has become the unofficial mantra at dealerships that are drowning in inventory. The numbers on the ground are staggering. Some dealers who normally hold 20 gas pickups are sitting on 40 or 50. Overflow lots are being rented just to contain the overspill. Customers walking in sense the unease. They see managers willing to talk numbers the moment they step through the door. For once, the power dynamic has shifted, and it is not in favor of the dealership. But what really exposes the scale of Chevy's desperation is not just the visual of crowded lots. It is the financial firepower being deployed to move those trucks. Incentive firepower. The quickest way to tell when a manufacturer is bleeding is to look at the incentive sheet. Chevy's current lineup of deals reads less like a promotional flyer and more like a distress call. Rebates worth thousands of dollars are stacked onto gas-powered Silverados, accompanied by 0% financing offers that would have been unthinkable only a year ago. Add in bonus cash for trade-ins and loyalty discounts, and buyers are walking away with savings that slash payments by hundreds every single month. This is not generosity, it is triage. Floor plan financing costs, those interest payments dealers make to keep vehicles on the lot, are eating into margins with every unsold day. Higher interest rates magnify the problem, turning unsold trucks into liabilities. For dealers, taking a loss on paper today is cheaper than bleeding cash tomorrow. Chevy knows this, which is why the incentive faucet is wide open. Shoppers are catching on. Savvy buyers come armed with screenshots of online offers, knowing dealers cannot risk turning them away. What once required tough negotiation now comes prepackaged as corporate policy. A Silverado that carried a price tag of $48,000 last year can be driven home for under $40,000 today. These incentives are not appearing in a vacuum. They are the surface symptom of a deeper structural flood of vehicles hitting the market all at once. If you've been following this far, hit that subscribe button. It tells me this is worth uncovering. Drop a comment with what you're seeing in your area, because your story might expose just how deep this collapse really runs. Supply glut mechanics. The mechanics behind this avalanche are deceptively simple. For years, Chevy thrived on record truck sales. That success planted a time bomb. Millions of vehicles entering the market simultaneously through lease expirations, fleet rotations, and trade-ins. The normal rhythm of supply and demand has been shattered by too much metal chasing too few buyers. Lease returns formed the first wave. Families who signed 3-year agreements during the peak years are now handing their trucks back, swelling dealer inventories with barely used Silverados. Fleet managers add the second wave, cycling out thousands of gas pickups from rental companies and corporate service fleets. The third wave comes from trade-ins, as loyalists swap older trucks for new models, even as demand softens. Each wave alone could have been absorbed. Together, they are overwhelming. Dealers who expected a steady stream are facing a tsunami. Average days on lot for 2 to 4-year-old pickups have stretched from less than 1 month to nearly 3 months. Wholesale auctions are jammed with overflow, and still the pipeline does not slow. What began as a supply celebration has become a glut nightmare, and just as dealers begin to accept the oversupply, another blow strikes. not from the market, but from Washington regulators. Confidence crash! Nothing rattles buyer confidence like the words federal investigation. Recently, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration opened a probe into reports of engine failures in certain gas-powered General Motors trucks and SUVs. The focus was on lifter and camshaft issues in V8 engines, the very power plants that many Silverado owners cherish for their torque and reliability. Even though the investigation is limited, perception spreads faster than fact. Shoppers reading headlines do not parse production codes or warranty ranges. They hear engine failure and back away. Dealers find themselves fielding nervous questions about recalls that may never even touch the vehicles on their lot. To protect reputations, many stores are selling potentially affected models at steep discounts, preferring to lose margin rather than risk holding tainted inventory. This cloud of uncertainty is lethal in a market already drowning in supply. Resale values dip further, trade-in offers collapse, and more buyers hold off entirely, waiting to see how the investigation unfolds. It is not the mechanical issue alone that damages the market. It is the narrative. Trust erodes, and with it, prices tumble faster. And just when it seems like oversupply, discounts, and defect fears have combined into an unstoppable spiral, the story shifts inside the dealership offices, where every decision becomes a fight for survival. Deal desk decisions. Step inside a Chevy dealership office today, and the tension is unmistakable. Managers sit behind desks stacked with sales reports, incentive sheets, and half-finished cups of coffee. Every pencil mark on a deal is less about maximizing profit and more about minimizing loss. The goal is no longer to win, but to survive. The math tells the story. Floor plan financing costs are suffocating stores. Every unsold Silverado sitting outside bleeds interest daily. In years past, a manager could hold firm on price, knowing buyers had few alternatives. Now, the calculus has flipped. The first priority is to move metal quickly, even if it means slashing thousands from the sticker. A buyer offering a reasonable number is no longer seen as a lowballer, but as a lifeline. Managers talk openly about the new reality. We cannot afford pride, one explained. If we can move a truck today, that is better than letting it age another week. Each decision becomes a balancing act between taking an immediate hit and risking a larger one down the road. But when the desk deals still do not clear inventory, there is only one path left for desperate dealers: the wholesale auction, where the market's brutality is laid bare. Auction lanes. The auction lanes are where reputations go to die. A Silverado that once carried prestige at retail becomes just another lot number on a digital bidding screen. Dealers who once laughed off offers now watch those same numbers dictate wholesale reality. When the hammer falls, pride is irrelevant. The only question is how much value evaporated. Auction houses across the country are packed with gas-powered pickups, many of them late-model Chevys returned from fleets or trade-ins. Bidders know the oversupply story, and they bid accordingly. Wholesale prices for some configurations are down by thousands, setting new benchmarks that ripple back into retail appraisals. A truck that sat at $45,000 on the lot may fetch $38,000 at auction, and that gap resets consumer expectations everywhere. For dealers, sending a truck to auction is often the lesser of two evils. Holding inventory too long risks deeper depreciation, while dumping it clears capital for faster-moving stock. It is a painful but necessary release valve in a collapsing market, yet auctions can only absorb so much before values freefall further. That is why the factories themselves must step in, pulling the only lever powerful enough to slow the flood: production. Factory levers. On the factory floor, silence can be louder than any announcement. When assembly lines pause, it signals a strategic decision from the top. Throttle supply before the glut becomes catastrophic. General Motors has already experimented with temporary shutdowns at its truck plants, framing them as routine adjustments. Workers know the truth. These pauses are about survival. Cutting production is cheaper than watching values collapse. Every Silverado that leaves the line adds to dealer pressure, so halting output provides breathing room. Executives prefer quiet pauses over public announcements because the optics of slashing production appear weak. Internally, however, managers admit that slowing the conveyor belt is the only tool left to to rebalance inventory. These pauses ripple through suppliers, shipping schedules, and regional economies. A week of silence means thousands of trucks never enter already stuffed lots. The math is simple. Fewer new arrivals allow dealers to work through what they already have. Still, this lever is blunt. Factories cannot pause indefinitely without harming profitability and worker morale, even as General Motors adjusts production. Another force has shifted the landscape: consumers themselves. Armed with information, emboldened by desperation on the lots, buyers have become sharper, tougher, and more ruthless than ever before. Consumer strategy. Buyers today do not arrive at the dealership blind. They walk in with printouts, screenshots, and calculators, fully aware that the market favors them. Inventory levels, incentive offers, and auction data are just a few clicks away, and consumers use this intelligence like a weapon. Shoppers pit dealers against each other with ease. A buyer in Ohio can email 3 stores within minutes, demanding each beat the other's offer. Trade-in quotes are cross-checked with online valuation tools, leaving little room for manipulation. Some even time their visits near the end of the month, when sales managers are desperate to hit volume bonuses. The result is unprecedented leverage. A Silverado that might have taken hours of haggling to discount a year ago now falls in price within minutes. Consumers who play the game correctly walk away with savings that would have been unimaginable not long ago. Dealers, once the masters of negotiation, now find themselves cornered by buyers who know the playbook better than they do. This shift in power is not a passing fad. It is the natural outcome of oversupply, incentives, and eroded trust. And while buyers are winning the short-term battle, the larger war is about to move into deeper territory. The structural reasons behind Chevy's collapse. Boom years backlash. Success often plants the seeds of failure, and Chevy's truck empire is a perfect example. For much of the past decade, Silverado sales soared. Dealerships could not keep inventory on the ground, and consumers lined up to pay premiums. Leasing boomed, with families and small businesses eager to lock into attractive monthly payments on brand-new gas-powered trucks. Fleet managers bulk ordered thousands of units, betting on steady demand and strong resale value. It looked like victory. But leases always end. Fleets always rotate. What seemed like endless success in 2020 and 2021 became the backbone of today's glut. As those 3-year leases expired, wave after wave of nearly new Silverados flooded back into the system. Fleet cycles added more, returning trucks en masse to auctions and retail lots. Dealers who celebrated record years did not realize they were pulling demand forward, borrowing from the future. Every truck sold then is a truck being returned now, with resale values collapsing under the sheer weight of volume. The same numbers that once fueled headlines of growth are now haunting the market, and the return of all those trucks collided with another brutal reality. The cost of money itself changed, transforming affordability into a crisis. Financial squeeze. During the easy money era, trucks sold themselves. Interest rates were at historic lows, lenders extended generous terms, and even high-priced gas pickups felt attainable. Buyers could spread costs over 7 or 8 years, keeping payments comfortable. But when the Federal Reserve began raising rates to tame inflation, the truck market felt the shock immediately. Suddenly, that $40,000 Silverado carried a monthly payment hundreds of dollars higher than it did a year before. Families already stretched by rising grocery bills and rent found those trucks out of reach. Even those who qualified for financing began hesitating, unwilling to take on debt that felt suffocating. Insurance costs piled on top of the problem. Premiums for large trucks rose faster than those for sedans, thanks to higher repair costs and more expensive parts. Add in surging fuel prices, and the math broke down entirely. A vehicle that once symbolized freedom now looked like a financial trap. The demand curve bent sharply downward. It was not about desire. Americans still loved trucks. It was about affordability. When the cost of borrowing skyrocketed, the pool of eligible buyers shrank overnight. And into this fragile environment came another blow, not from interest rates or insurance tables, but from the power of perception, where a single headline can erase billions in value. Reputation damage? In the auto market, perception often moves faster than fact. A single headline about a potential defect can sink confidence before engineers even finish their investigation. That is exactly what happened to Chevy's gas-powered trucks. Reports of engine lifter failures and camshaft wear in certain V8 models ignited a storm. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration probe amplified the fear. For the average buyer, nuance disappears. They do not track which VIN ranges are affected, or whether failures are rare. All they see is a headline linking Silverados with expensive repairs. On social media, the story spreads with gasoline speed. Photos of stalled trucks, anecdotes of five-figure repair bills, and angry owner testimonials fill feeds and forums. This perception creates a vicious cycle. Resale values plunge because shoppers demand discounts to offset potential risks. Trade-in offers collapse as dealers brace for the possibility of costly warranty claims. Even unaffected trucks take collateral damage, tarred by association. The depreciation curve steepens not because every truck is faulty, but because trust has cracked. Dealers admit the hardest part is not the repairs, but the questions. Every hesitant glance from a shopper carries the weight of rumor, and every stalled sale feels tied to a headline rather than a defect. In this fragile environment, perception becomes the single most expensive liability Chevy must constantly manage. And while Chevy scrambles to manage the narrative, competitors quietly sharpen their knives, preparing to exploit the chaos and defend their own positions. Competitor response. Chevy's collapse does not happen in isolation. The truck market is an ecosystem, and when one giant stumbles, others feel the tremors. Ford, Ram, and Toyota know that Chevy's freefall reshapes buyer expectations. If Silverados are being dumped at steep discounts, rival models cannot maintain sky-high price tags without looking out of touch. Ford dealers are cutting deals on F-150s, even on trims that once commanded markups. Ram, whose recent redesign positioned it as a luxury alternative, is quietly trimming margins to stay competitive. Toyota, long shielded by the Tundra's reputation for reliability, now faces pressure as buyers cross-shop discounted Silverados against its higher-priced models. The ripple effect is clear. Every discount Chevy deploys drags rivals closer to the floor. None of these companies want a race to the bottom, but the market leaves them no choice. Shoppers will not pay premium prices when a comparable Chevy sits thousands cheaper down the street. This reactive chain creates an arms race of incentives, one that squeezes profitability across the entire sector. What began as Chevy's crisis is rapidly becoming an industry-wide battle. Analysts note that this forced repositioning is eroding brand loyalty. Shoppers who once swore by a single badge are now crossing showrooms, comparing discounts instead of reputations. The collapse of Chevy's pricing has effectively trained consumers to hunt bargains first, leaving Ford, Ram, and Toyota vulnerable to the same value erosion. And if competitors are being forced to play defense, the next act of the story moves beyond business strategy into broader systems: policy, politics, and labor. Policy wildcards. Truck prices are not set by dealerships alone. In Washington, a single pen stroke can move the market by billions. Tariffs on imported steel and aluminum have already raised manufacturing costs, and trade disputes with Mexico threaten to disrupt cross-border supply chains. The auto sector lives and dies by these political decisions, often made far from the assembly lines that bear the brunt. Consider tariffs. A duty on foreign metals means higher costs per unit, which manufacturers pass along to dealers and buyers. That might sound manageable in strong markets, but in the middle of a collapse, even a modest increase can crush affordability. On the flip side, a tariff rollback or a new trade agreement could lower costs overnight, triggering a brief window of cheaper production. Regulation is another wild card. Stricter safety or emission standards force redesigns, adding costs at the worst possible time. Looser rules can relieve pressure, but often spark political battles that leave companies hesitant to commit. Policymakers may claim to protect consumers, but in practice, their decisions ripple directly into truck prices. Analysts note that this forced repositioning is eroding brand loyalty. Shoppers who once swore by a single badge are now crossing showrooms, comparing discounts instead of reputations. The collapse of Chevy's pricing has effectively trained consumers to hunt bargains first, leaving Ford, Ram, and Toyota vulnerable to the same value erosion. Political uncertainty magnifies the instability. A single election cycle can flip trade policy on its head, leaving manufacturers scrambling to adjust strategies planned years in advance. Dealers and buyers alike live in suspense, knowing that tomorrow's announcement from Washington could instantly inflate prices, or just as quickly unlock a temporary reprieve. And while Washington argues over tariffs and regulations, the human cost is already being felt on the factory floor, where the people building these trucks face a harsher reality than any spreadsheet can capture. Labor fallout. When trucks stop moving, so do paychecks. In towns anchored by Chevy plants, the slowdown has triggered waves of layoffs and furloughs. Union leaders warn of shrinking shifts, canceled overtime, and temporary closures that may stretch into months. For workers who once relied on steady assembly line jobs, uncertainty has replaced stability. The pain does not stop at the plant gates. Parts suppliers in surrounding counties face reduced orders. Small shops that provide services, from welding to upholstery, see contracts vanish. Even local diners near factories, long filled with workers on lunch breaks, feel the decline as foot traffic dries up. Every stalled truck is more than unsold metal. It is a ripple that disrupts livelihoods. Labor tensions flare as unions push back against reduced hours and demand guarantees. Companies, under pressure to slash costs, resist. The result is a brewing conflict between executives counting losses and employees fighting for survival. In places where one plant supports thousands of families, the collapse of truck sales feels like an earthquake, shaking entire communities. Political uncertainty magnifies the instability. A single election cycle can flip trade policy on its head, leaving manufacturers scrambling to adjust strategies planned years in advance. Dealers and buyers alike live in suspense, knowing that tomorrow's announcement from Washington could instantly inflate prices or, just as quickly, unlock a temporary reprieve. But the shock does not stop with workers. Beyond the factory towns, ordinary families are discovering that the truck market's implosion reaches into their daily lives in ways they never expected. Community impact. The truck market is not an isolated bubble. It is woven into everyday life, often in invisible ways. When values collapse, the consequences spill into the broader economy. Contractors who finance trucks at peak prices now struggle to make payments, passing their financial strain into delayed projects or higher service costs. Farmers hauling goods with depreciated pickups cut corners to survive, and those cuts eventually raise food prices on supermarket shelves. Freight is another link. A used truck market in freefall drags down the value of smaller commercial fleets. Delivery companies that once relied on steady resale value to finance upgrades now face heavier debt loads. That stress means tighter budgets for wages and more fees tacked onto shipping. Consumers, whether they drive a truck or not, end up paying through groceries, packages, and services tied to transportation. Communities also lose property tax revenue as values fall. Trucks are not just personal assets, they are part of local tax bases. A collapse in assessed values means smaller school budgets and tighter municipal finances. The truck glut, in other words, shows up on your grocery bill, your delivery charges, and even your child's classroom. Families in factory towns feel the strain beyond the paycheck. Mortgage payments become harder to meet, college savings are paused, and local charities report rising demand for food assistance. The slowdown is not just an industrial event, it is a personal crisis that reshapes household decisions in deeply unsettling ways. And while these ripple effects hit hard, some consumers are finding ways to turn the chaos into opportunity if they know how to play the game. Playbook for buyers. For consumers willing to act decisively, the truck collapse presents a once-in-a-generation buying window. The rules of negotiation have flipped, and buyers now hold the power. The key is to approach the process with strategy, not emotion. First, comparison shopping has never been more effective. With inventory piling up, dealers cannot afford to lose a prospect. Presenting competing quotes forces managers to cut deeper. Second, timing is crucial. End-of-month and end-of-quarter deadlines push sales staff to meet volume bonuses, often leading to thousands shaved off in a single conversation. Third, cash is leverage. Even partial down payments reduce financing risks for dealers, making them more flexible on price. Trade-ins require particular caution. Values have collapsed, but some dealers still attempt to undercut further, checking multiple sources, online tools, regional auctions, even nearby competitors, gives buyers the data to fight back. Walking away is no longer a bluff. It is a strategy that forces concessions. The market may eventually stabilize as factories cut production and dealers clear inventory, but that day is not here yet. For now, buyers who treat the collapse like a chess game, not a casual purchase, stand to save tens of thousands of dollars. And if the truck market has proven anything, it is that what looks like a corporate crisis can become a personal opportunity, if you know where to push. You've seen the cracks in the truck market, the pressure on workers, the ripple effects hitting your community, and now you know this isn't just about vehicles. It's about money, control, and survival. If this opened your eyes, make sure you subscribe right now so you never miss what's coming next. Drop a comment with your take. I want to hear how this collapse is touching your world. And hit like so more people wake up to what's unfolding. Stay ready, stay sharp, because the next wave is already here.